The night before the storm was quiet, too quiet for a war that never seemed to rest. Over the Black Sea, a low mist rolled across the dark waters, swallowing the horizon in a ghostly veil. The air was heavy, damp, humming faintly with the promise of violence. From the Ukrainian coast, lights glimmered faintly, each pulse of electricity a small defiance against the darkness that had settled over their country for nearly 2 years. In a dimly lit hangar not far from the shore, men and women in gray fatigues huddled around a bank of glowing monitors. The smell of oil and solder clung to the air. Screens flickered with drone telemetry. Altitude, bearing, wind drift, target distance. The lead operator, a thin man with weary eyes named Dmitro, rubbed his temples as he watched the coordinates shift in green text. 17 drones, same flight path, low altitude, said a voice behind him. He nodded, barely looking up. They'll expect us now, he murmured, but we don't stop. Not tonight. Outside, the drones waited like steel birds, roosting before dawn. Each one was sleek, handmade from carbon and willpower, their fuselages scarred by the crude efficiency of wartime necessity. Mechanics moved around them like surgeons, whispering final checks. One brushed his gloved hand along a nose cone and whispered something. Not technical, more like a prayer. At exactly 010, the order came through. The hangar doors yawned open, and the night swallowed the machines, one by one. Engines whined up to a sharp metallic hum, then disappeared into the vast, moonless expanse. Far out at sea, beyond where the coastline melted into ink, the Ivanovets missile corvette rocked gently in the swells, its deck lights casting gold halos on the water. Inside, sailors played cards, smoked cheap cigarettes, laughed too loudly to hide their unease. The captain, Nikolai Sidorov, sat alone in his cabin, staring at a photograph of his daughter. She was 10, missing her 2 front teeth, and grinning like she didn't know what fear was. He touched the edge of the photo, tracing the curve of her smile. When this ends, he said to himself, I'll take her to the sea, a real trip, just the 2 of us. Outside, fog thickened. Somewhere in the gray, something moved. Sir, possible contact. Bearing 182, low altitude, came the report from the radar room. Sidorov's jaw tightened. Birds? The ensign shook his head. Not birds, sir. Moving too fast. The captain rose, straightened his coat, and stepped out onto the bridge. The sea looked endless and calm, a cruel disguise. Bring up the guns, he said. Let's see what ghosts haunt us tonight. Back in Ukraine, Dmitro leaned closer to his monitor. The drone's camera cut through the mist, painting the ship in ghostly grayscale. 20 kilometers. 15. The ocean hissed in the microphone feed, a ceaseless whisper. Vector holding. All units in sync, said another operator. Keep formation, Dmitro replied. His voice was steady, but inside he felt that familiar churn of fear and awe. It wasn't killing he feared. It was the moment before, that breathless pause when a machine became a weapon and a man became a god or a ghost. He thought of his brother, who died 2 years earlier defending a border town. Dmitro had buried him in silence, then volunteered for the drone corps. He told himself it wasn't revenge. It was precision. It was evolution. But sometimes when the drones rose into the dark, he felt like he was sending parts of his own soul with them. On the ship, alarms began to wail. Red lights flooded the corridors. Men scrambled from bunks, half-dressed, boots clattering against metal. The captain barked orders into the radio. Activate Panzer, bring up the gun crew, get eyes on the horizon. The missile defense turret groaned as it turned, sensors scanning fog and waves. Then, the first spark. A streak of tracer fire cut through the night, followed by another. The ship's guns erupted in violent light, their thunder rolling across the water. Shells exploded in mid-air, carving blossoms of flame against the black. The drones dove, twisting, their small engines screaming in defiance. Dimitro's hands danced across the controls. One feed went dark. A hit. Another flared white, blinded by its own explosion. But more still moved forward, low and relentless. 10 kilometers. 5. "Stay with me," he whispered. A drone skimmed barely above the waves, its shadow rippling on the surface. On the Russian ship, gunners fired wildly, panic overtaking discipline. One sailor slipped on wet steel and vanished into the sea without a sound. The captain gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus. "They're small," he said, "fragile. We'll swat them down." But even as he spoke, one drone broke through and slammed into the aft deck. The explosion was sharp, not massive, but the shockwave tore through open hatches and ricocheted down passageways. Men screamed, alarms multiplied. From the command post, Dimitro saw the bloom of fire through thermal imaging. His stomach twisted. "Impact confirmed," he said quietly. Still the rest kept going. 5 drones left, then 3, then 2. The Russian ship listed slightly, smoke pouring from the stern. Yet Sidorov refused to abandon. "Countermeasures," he roared. "We hold the line." But the sea was no longer his ally. It was alive, restless, full of metallic ghosts. The final drone hit near the bow, a blinding flash, then silence. The ship shuddered once, twice, and began to tilt, its wounded hull bleeding fire and fuel into the water. For a long time, no one spoke in the Ukrainian control room. Only the soft hum of cooling fans and the distant cry of seagulls through the open hangar doors. Then someone whispered, "Target neutralized." Dimitro exhaled, leaning back in his chair. The screen showed nothing but smoke and waves. His hands trembled slightly, not from excitement, but exhaustion. Around him others stared in quiet disbelief. There was no cheer, no laughter, only the hollow calm of survival. "Good work," said his commander softly. "Go home. Rest." But Dimitro didn't move. He kept staring at the gray blur on the monitor until it turned black. His reflection stared back, pale, tired, and older than he remembered. Far away in the fading light of dawn, the sea swallowed the last of the flames. The wreck of the Ivanovets sank slowly, its nameplate glinting once before disappearing into darkness. Somewhere below, twisted metal settled among the cold silt, another monument to a war fought by men who never met. Captain Sidorov did not go down with his ship. He floated on the wreckage, coughing salt and smoke, staring at the morning sky that turned pink and gold. Around him, the bodies of his crew drifted like silent witnesses. He thought of his daughter again, her laughter, her missing teeth, her voice calling him Papa. The sea rocked him gently, almost kindly, as if trying to lull him to sleep. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Forgive me?" When the Ukrainian rescue signal picked up the wreck hours later, they found him clinging to a shattered lifebuoy, half conscious, half dreaming. They didn't know his name. They didn't know his story. To them, he was just another casualty of an endless machine. By morning, the news spread. Another ship destroyed, another victory claimed, headlines filled with pride and precision, numbers, coordinates, confirmed hits. But for those who had guided the drones through the night, victory felt like ash. Dimitro stood outside the hangar, watching the sunrise spill gold across the broken tarmac. The air smelled of fuel and sea salt. For the first time in months he took out a cigarette, his brother's old habit, and lit it with a shaking hand. He imagined the men on the ship, their fear, their confusion. He imagined the captain holding onto a photograph as the sea took him. He had never seen their faces, but somehow he knew them all. War had made him a ghost, living among signals and screens. He no longer aimed at people, only pixels, and yet every explosion still felt like a heartbeat stopping somewhere he couldn't see. That night, when the hangar fell silent again, Dmytro sat at his console long after everyone had gone. The monitors glowed dimly, showing the still waters of the Black Sea. He placed his hand on the control stick one last time, tracing its worn plastic surface like an old friend. Outside, the tide rolled in, slow, steady, eternal. In its rhythm there was no vengeance, no victory, only the quiet truth that all wars end the same way, with the sea reclaiming what men thought they owned, and the sky watching forever indifferent.